For our fourth and final essay, we have a literary analysis. This is essentially what we've been doing the whole month, but with a different subject, a story instead of ourselves or a place. The assignment sheet is here on our week 4 page, which is the final entry on our little weekly assignments folders. And that assignment sheet looks like this. Essentially, we are doing the same thing, asking how and why, but instead of asking that of ourselves or of a place, we are asking it of a piece of literature. And for our purposes, that means anything we've seen fiction-wise from the earlier weeks and a couple of new entries. And I've listed all of that here. We've got The Lottery, Cask of Amontillado Hills, A&P. Those are 4 pieces we've seen before. I don't have everything on here because use of force is a little too short to be comfortable in writing a whole paper over it, and A Plague of Ticks is nonfiction, and I wanted this to be an analysis of a fiction piece. So I have these 4 entries from earlier, and I've added The Chrysanthemums, a Steinbeck short story, and something from Kate Chopin, Desiree's Baby. So pick one of these 6 as the topic of your essay, or as the primary source, rather. When I say primary source, I mean the thing the essay is about, as opposed to a secondary source, which would be like an essay that I give over one of these stories, or a scholarly research article written about one of these authors or stories. Those would be secondary sources, whereas the short story you're writing your essay about will be the primary source. The reason I mention those 2 types of sources, and the reason we have this as our 4th assignment, is because in Comp 2, everything is about research. In fact, I don't know if here this is the case, but everywhere I teach, pretty much, the difference between the titles of the classes is Comp 1 is Comp 1, and Comp 2 is English Composition and Research, or English Composition 2 and Research. So research, as in looking up scholarly stuff about the thing that you're thinking and writing about, is the main event for Comp 2, and I want to prepare us for the transition between Comp 1 and 2 by kind of getting our feet wet in terms of research. Now, the key difference between what we're going to write for our 4th essay and the essays you'll be writing in a Comp 2 class is that I'm not asking for secondary research. All I'm asking is for you to become comfortable using material from your primary source, in this case, the short story itself that you pick, and combining that with your own ideas. That is why this 3rd entry, Quote Integration Examples, is available on our week 4 page, and that links to a document in my Dropbox that looks like this. It is simply a list of examples of integrating quotes from a primary or secondary source into the writer's own words. And here's what I mean by that. Let's look at the first example. This is from a advertisement analysis, something I ask my students to do in Comp 2, and it's the student taking the quote, which is in red, from their source. They have an article written by, I think this is Malcolm Gladwell, a writer, an author, and it's from page 847. No, they don't have a 1,000-page book they're using. That's an anthology, and the Gladwell article takes up 20 pages, somewhere around this range. So it's from that page number, that author name. That's how we cite sources in MLA format. And the quote is in red. What the student has done, this is a negative example, what the student has done is, this is all the student's own words, and the student's work itself is fine, and the quote itself is fine, but the problem is there's no integration. Look at the border between the student's work and the quote. The student says, here's this stuff about my topic, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I think about the topic. I think this is what the advertisers want people to think, driving a Range Rover feels like. And I also believe it is this is probably an analysis of a Matthew McConaughey. No, he's Lincoln. I'm thinking Lincoln. But this is an analysis of a car commercial, right? I also believe it is a very effective method to people who are simply watching the commercial as opposed to analyzing it. So that's a good sentence. It's an analysis sentence. The student is kind of estimating why an advertiser would frame a car commercial in a certain way, right? But then they have period and quote. So let's read that. I also believe it's a very effective method to people who are simply watching the commercial as opposed to analyzing it. This may seem like an awfully roundabout way to sell a man a pair of pants or vehicle, but this was the genius of the campaign. So this is an applicable quote. This article, by the way, is about khakis, about how clothing companies sell men's pants and the particular strategies and ways they go about doing that, especially in terms of differences of how women's clothing is advertised. But the student has drawn some parallels between selling cars and selling clothes, and there's overlap, so it's a good source. But there's no integration. They just drop this quote into the middle of their own paragraph like they're dropping a mic or dropping a marker on a table. They just walk up, and if the marker is their quote, they just walk up and boom, they just drop it on the table and walk away, right? That's no good. There's another negative example here that sort of does the same thing. So let's look at a more positive example. And this is using the same article, the Gladwell piece. Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell, Listening to Khakis is the name of the article. And this is a strong example of it. So let's see what this student does. The student's own words, again, are in black. I think that people remember the jokes instead of what the commercial is selling, which can make for an ineffective advertisement overall. So this is the student's own analysis, what they think and how the topic, the commercial is effective, or in this case, in the student's opinion, ineffective, right? And then they say, and here's their period, here's the end of the sentence, and then they say, in Malcolm Gladwell's Listening to Khakis, he states that, quote, one of the truisms of advertising is that it is always easier to sell at extremes than in the middle, end quote. And then we have the parenthetical citation, Gladwell 845. The reason this works is because the student begins the sentence in his own words and then transitions into the quote by saying he states that. He could just as easily have said, Malcolm Gladwell claims blah, blah, blah. Or in the article Listening to Khakis, we learn that, quote, one of the truisms, blah, blah, blah. The student does a good job of naming both author and title. The student doesn't say that this is a scholarly article or a book or whatever, but they could say that. They could name the medium of the source. But the most important thing is that this student begins a sentence in their own words and then transitions smoothly, the same way you would look at dialogue in a fiction. He said, comma, blah, 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 right? And then transitions into the quote. They don't just drop the quote into the middle of their paragraph in its own sentence, disconnected from the sentences of the student themselves, right? So looking at the negative example, there's no transition there. There's no smooth transition from the author, the writer's own words, to the source. Whereas here, there is. We name the author, we name the source title, and then we transition smoothly. And then, very important, afterwards, the student then analyzes that quote. So we introduce a quote before it, we format it properly, quotation marks, parenthetical citation, and then we analyze. And this is what you need to do in order to succeed in Comp 2 and in our fourth essay. Introduce a quote, format it properly, analyze it. Introduce, format, analyze. Introduce, format, analyze. Every time. If you can do that with 2 quotes in every body paragraph in any essay you write, you're going to do well in one of the most important ways you can when it comes to Comp 2. I'm only asking for 3 quotes from your primary source for our essay. And remember, your primary source is going to be one of these short stories. And the essay assignment sheet makes clear that we only need 3, I'm looking for it, 3 quotes, here we are, it's in bold, right in front of my face, quotes from the story being analyzed. And that's 1 per body paragraph if you only have 3 body paragraphs. Now, as I said in class, feel free to expand from the 5-paragraph essay if you're comfortable with that. I think that's a good idea just so you don't feel stuck in one template. So if you have 4, 5, 6 body paragraphs, then you should have 4, 5, 6 quotes. Each body paragraph in a literary analysis needs to be focused on analyzing the story in some way, and therefore it should have at least 1 quote from that story in there. You can use paraphrases in place of some quotes if you're comfortable doing that. If you're not comfortable doing that, stick to quotes, and that's just fine. The way to format them is available on the OWL at Purdue, as I mentioned, and there's even a link in the page to the OWL at Purdue itself. I think you have to control click, yeah, and then you'll get the link there itself if you're using it in Google Docs. If you open it as a Word doc, you should be able to just click directly. Of course, the OWL at Purdue is also linked through our syllabus as well, so you can always get to that. The last thing that I list on our week 4 page is this scholarly research pocket guide, and this is a very brief resource that I have kind of tweaked over the years. I originally got it from my wife, who is also an English teacher and a full professor here and much better at everything period that I do or that she does than I am. So I basically stole her great brain, and this is a very brief guide on how to conduct scholarly research. It will definitely be necessary for Comp 2, but like I said, this essay is sort of the transition essay to prepare you for Comp 2. So take a look at it. We've got some good ways that you can use Google, one of the Google tools, in this case Google Scholar, to come up with good sources. And then we have some more search tips for that here. And just in general, there's even a link to one of my wife's video lectures in which she goes in depth on performing scholarly research. So this is just good practices in general for writing research-based essays, which this essay kind of is, all right? So you don't have to get into that in depth, but you should definitely take a look at the quote integration examples, and you should take a look at some of these stories. The final thing I'll say and give an example of here is when you're writing your essay, we've looked at kind of step-by-step how to put together essays in our class. Claim sentence, right, which also needs to be your transition sentence, and then your own idea, a detail or specific, and then a sentence of analysis, and then maybe another piece of description, a detail or a specific, and then another piece of analysis. There's 5 sentences right there. When we were writing about ourselves or a place, that would be something like, body paragraph begins with, the most important part of my personality is my sense of humor, period. There's my topic sentence. No transition, but don't worry about it. When I was 5 years old, my parents took me to see George Carlin in New York. I don't know why you'd take a 5-year-old to see George Carlin. That's terribly inappropriate, but he's a funny man. So there's a what, boom. There's a what and a when and a where, right? New York, George Carlin, 5 years old. And then a sentence of analysis. His irreverent insults showed me that you don't have to be clean or neat to be funny. There's kind of a piece of analysis, right? So there's 3 of the 5 sentences right there. We've kind of done that with each assignment. For this one, the template is going to remain about the same, but we could be slightly different. So let me go down here to our own little space here, and I'll write. If we're going to write a body paragraph in our literary analysis, let's say that I'm writing about the Cask of Amontillado, which is one of the short stories on our list. One of my body paragraphs might begin like this. Additionally, the reason the narrator in Amontillado is an alien. Let's see. Wait. How about one additional reason we know the narrator in Amontillado is an alien is. So right here, what I'm doing is this word additional, that's one of the transition words on smartwords.org that one of the sites I've showed us to find good transition phrases. This is kind of a weak transition, but it's sort of there, right? And in this paper, my thesis, my main idea, and when I say thesis, you can look at our literary analysis assignment sheet, and it talks about an arguable thesis, which is simply a fancy way of saying a main idea that makes an argument. Remember, when we looked at the use of force, we said the primary arguments for this one are the doctor acts ethically or the doctor acts unethically, right? Either one of those is an arguable thesis, plain and simple. So in this example, my thesis would be something like the narrator in the Cask of Amontillado is an alien. The reason I'm using that for this example, by the way, is because that's a ridiculous thesis that you should never try, because there's no way I'm going to pull that off. There's no evidence to support it, right? But I don't want to spoil the story for you by giving a feasible thesis that you would either then want to use and felt like you couldn't, or whatever. So I'm just going with this for the sake of our example to kind of structurally show how we should format a paragraph for this essay. Additional reason narrator Amontillado alien is his absurd costume. period. There is my topic sentence, right? Now I'm going to give a specific detail so that I can analyze. The difference is I need to incorporate at least one quote from my source, right? Um, let's see. When he lures Fortunato into the crypts, he wears. So that's a phrase of specific detail, right? But now I'm going to use the author's own words. A party-colored motley jester suit, comma, quote. Now, this isn't a real quote from the story. I know he says something about wearing motley, which is just a fancy way of saying lots of different colors, kind of patchwork. But you see what I've done here is, just like in the examples earlier, I'll put the author's words in red. I've started my own sentence, and then I have transitioned smoothly into the quote itself. I've tied my own words to the words of the quote. And that helps bring the ideas together in a way that helps me make clear what I'm trying to say in the essay. So there's my end quote. When he lures Fortunato into the crypts, he wears a blah, 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 which shows his, insanity and his comic, or let's see, his sense of dark comedy, right? Because he's dressed like a jester, which you'd think would be funny, but then he murders the dude, so that's kind of weird. So now I'm transitioning into analysis, right? So I'm going to give a sentence or two of analysis. First, let's see. By wearing an outfit of many clashing colors, because that's what party-colored kind of means. In fact, if we say party-colored images, you can see that here's a good example from the Middle Ages. You see this kind of patchwork outfit, with lots of stripes, and then the legs have horizontal stripes. One leg is, different than the other. It's sort of a mess, right? But this is party-colored, right? It's just all over the place. By wearing an outfit of many clashing colors, he signals his rejection of traditional social rules, and by let's just stop there. We also know that he, picked his outfit because, and here again I'm going to use another quote. I wanted to, neither by word nor deed did I betray my intention. This is a paraphrase. So normally I would not put this in quotes. Normally I would stick with just paraphrasing it. But early in the story, he says something about how when he decides he's going to kill the guy, he still acts nice to him because he doesn't want Fortunato to know that he hates him. Because, if you're going to murder somebody in a twisted way, if you're nice to them, they won't see it coming, right? So this is another transition where I start my own sentence and then I transition into the words of the quote. We also know that he picked his outfit because blah, 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 quote. This deception proves the depth of his madness and his disconnection from reality, all of which is demonstrated by his we're talking about his clothes, right? Remember, his costume is the topic, so I'm going to stay on topic. Demonstrated by his clownish clothing, right? That's kind of weak, but what I've done here structurally is pretty solid. I've got my topic sentence with a transitional phrase. Now, this isn't as good of a transitional phrase as if I repeated a word or phrase from what came before, but since we don't have anything coming before, don't worry about that. And then I begin with specific detail, and I incorporate a quote from the story, and I smoothly transition into that quote by putting it within one of my own sentences instead of just dropping it down in the middle as its own sentence. And then I analyze that. I say, okay, what does his weird outfit mean? Well, here's what I think. He's rejecting social rules. And that makes sense because think about that weird kid in your high school class who always wore something funky, and it was because they wanted to be edgy, or they thought that they were like special or different, and maybe they were, maybe they didn't have a great home life. Now I'm just projecting, but you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes clothing indicates the choices we're making on a social level, right? And I say that about the story. And then I say, we also know he picked his outfit because, and I'm just leading in, I'm introducing my quote, right? And I'm formatting it. And what I would also need to format this properly is I would need a page number, right? And in fact, let's do that here. I'm just making up these page numbers, right? But we need author name and then page number. So I've introduced my quote, I've formatted it properly, and then I've analyzed it, right? And I can always try to squeeze more analysis out of my quote. Typically, as a rule, every time you include a quote or paraphrase from a source, you want to get at least a couple sentences of analysis out of it. This will really help you stay on track with your description versus analysis balance, right? So this is just a demo literary analysis paragraph there. And what I'll do is I'll highlight this, and I'll actually go ahead and I'll add it to the literary analysis assignment sheet. So what I'll do is I'll just insert a page break, and I'll just drop it right there so that we've got it. So you can refer back to it later if you want. That is all of the material on week 4. Because I've had to just shuffle the schedule with me not being able to go in yesterday and meet with you guys, we are going to throw the last journal and outline out the window. So don't worry about those points, and just focus on this last essay. Let's get it done and turned in by the end of the week, so Sunday by the end of the day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our weekly assignment and turn-in drop boxes, and I'm going to add a Dropbox essay for literary analysis. Man, I wish I could type that word. Turn in thingy. Turn in your 4th essay here. It is due by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, June. What day is that going to be? I'm so bad at days. 28th. Where are we? Where are we? There we are. 28th. All right. So that will be available on our assignment Dropbox. You can also, of course, email it to me in case you have any issues with the assignment Dropbox. If you do, whichever one of those you do, remember Google Docs or DocX format, please. As always, email me or swing by, or maybe not swing by, or text me or contact me through Remind with any questions that you might have.